Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the table. I'm Robbie.
I'm Jason.
And we are the bards of the board. So, did I even do that? I did. Normally,
you did wrong.
I did it wrong, but that's fine. We're a little offbeat. For those of you who are listening to the podcast, we're thrown off. If you're an audio listener, hopefully things sound as normal as possible.
Yeah.
But if you are a visual watcher, you can tell
there's something different.
We're here.
Together.
Yep. That's a good time. So excited to do this, Jason.
He was so excited he just changed the intro altogether. So
altogether. Welcome to the table and then introduced us.
As opposed to we're bards of the board. I'm Robbie, Jason.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah.
It's we're 12 episodes in. Yep. We're still learning.
Yep.
And this is a learning process in itself, just in that I get to come up here several times during the year, and I feel like if this goes well, we now know we can do this.
Yeah, for sure.
For future purposes. And if it goes horribly wrong, we'll never do it again. I'll still come and visit, but we just won't do the podcast. It'll be a great time. How are you doing today, Jason?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing swell. We actually, in real time, we're shooting this at about 9 o'clock at night. We just finished a game. And I think it's important, based on where we're at right now, we teased it in the last episode. I know I talked about if I haven't played any games, Jason could just take over because it's Fantastic February.
Right.
I don't think we explained Fantastic February.
No, we've never talked about it. So yeah,
Tell us what it is.
Fantastic February. This will be the 10th year of Fantastic February in my household. Fantastic February is where my family gets together. We play a different board game every single night, and we actually have a competition for it. So it's pretty. The very first year we just tracked games we played, and then we tracked who won. And then last year was the first empty nest edition because all my kids are in college, and it's just me and my wife. And she pulled out the victory. We actually won the same amount of games during the year, during the month, but she won with point differential because we track everything via BG stats. So it's pretty fun. It got real heated for a while with our kids, and at some point on the Instagram page I'll be doing photos. We don't have it up, but we actually track it on poster boards, and we track our wins and losses based on stickers that we think are fun, and there's a point-based system. That's also where, if you follow any of my personal stuff, it's Fantastic February Disc Golf. That's just where it came from because we've been doing it for so long. So tonight was game number 2, and I'm 2-0 against Elizabeth. I think I'm up to 15-3 in my last 18 total games. Robbie beat me tonight, so that's why he made it. I was hoping to go 16-2, but it made it 15-3. So I'm on a little bit of a run right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I was joking that so when I come up, we play what do you say, an average of. On all the trips we've played, let's throw Heiser Club Championships aside because it was a weekend as opposed to a week. I feel like we usually get at least 6 games.
Oh, yeah, at least 6. At least. For sure, because we almost average 2 a night when we can. And usually 4 nights because on Monday night, you usually hang out with other folks because it's a long day for you. Yeah. And Tuesday through Friday, in general, we'll play roughly 2 games. So it's 6 to 8, depending on how crazy it is. This week's a little different because of the travel. But yeah.
Because even, I feel like we'll hit a heavy game, and then we'll hit a light one. On the bat, it'll be okay, we just played this 3-hour game. Whew.
Yeah, let's decompress.
You want to do a fun one?
Let's decompress a little bit, so for sure.
Which is the beautiful part of, I think, board games in general, is even, when you look at Jason's collection, something that I think is really unique about board games is oftentimes you'll look at a big, heavy box, and you'll think, that game is so intense. And then you'll look at a small box, like today's game has a very small box. Yeah. But just because, talk about don't judge a book by its cover, some games have a very small box and are incredibly heavy.
Yeah.
The one that comes to mind when I think about this, and it is chilling at the top, Calico. It's going to be out of frame for you guys, but Calico, the box is no bigger than, I would say it's a pretty small box for
it is
a board game. And it might be one of the crunchiest games I've ever played.
Yeah, super tight. That is the fun thing about board games. When we talk about a big game, a little box, or just like a game we've covered, Splendor. Mm-hmm. You really could fit in a super small box. It comes in a standard size box, but it's really a bunch of cards and a bunch of poker chip type tokens. You could put it in a super small box, and that's it. But you have a lot of game in that. So the big game gives you the idea, but if that was in a small box, it would have you just the same level of the game. So it is always fun to see that. It's like there's a whole world of gaming where you have big miniatures in the game. They're just basically instead of having a wood token, you replace it with a miniature, and I love those things. Yeah. So sometimes that can get overwhelming with those games, but then you're like, oh, it's really just a piece you're moving around the board. It's just
It
to
could
kind of
be
add the
it could
fun.
be a cube.
Yeah, the toy factor of it. It changes it from a cube to a mini that you can paint. There's a whole world of miniature paintings where you paint the little bitty plastic toy. Think of your old, army men who were all green. You could have painted them if you wanted to. I didn't even think about that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Essentially the same thing, except most time those miniatures are gray, and then folks go hardcore with painting them. So
I thought about like if I kickstart Veiled Fate, which I got to introduce Jason to on this trip. I've thought about like, okay, how much do I have to pay Will and Hannah
yeah.
to like leave the miniatures up there? Like if I get nicer miniatures with a Kickstarter, like leave it up there with them and be like, can you guys just go nuts?
They'd probably be happy to do it for you for sure. Because Will is often painting a good bit because he's painted for years and years. Will is my son-in-law. Hannah's my daughter. Hey Hannah, Will. So, Hannah's, I think, the only one who actually listens to this podcast. It's okay. We know how it is. Like, my wife doesn't listen to it. My kids don't listen to it. But Hannah, or two of my kids doesn't. Hannah is pretty good about listening to them. So, anyway, speaking of games, Robbie, what games have you been playing and you want to talk about today?
Man, yeah. So the fun, like I said, we were literally like, okay, we've played this many games. Who's talking about which one? Role Player, the game we just played, talking about Will and Hannah and D&D because they still come to your house to play D&D with college friends. And Role Play, another game that we've talked about in the past is Call to Adventure. And as someone who loves the D&D universe, and I love building a character, talking strength, dexterity, charisma, intelligence, wisdom, those stats, it's really, really fun. And I think that there are oftentimes you can have someone who loves D&D who isn't necessarily a board gamer, or board gamers who don't really love D&D. So when you find a game that carries into both worlds, and like I think it was last episode that we discovered, if the theme is rich,
right,
I'm more likely to get into it. And so, Role Player, you're building a character. You have like a race, or like it feels like a race.
You have a
class, a backstory, an alignment,
right,
and all of those things change your scoring opportunities. And then you're going to the market and you're drafting dice to fill your character sheet out, just as if you were starting a D&D character. You would roll dice to be like, oh, this is what my dexterity is, blah, blah, blah. So they're colored dice. You're choosing them correctly, and everybody's adding die at the same time. So there is a drafting phase to it that's a really cool feature to a game. There is dice involvement, so very Sagrada-esque. And so there is randomness to it, but there's also strategy and planning that you're trying to pull off. So it's a nice balance of, it's not so crunchy that like it's just who can exact their sheer will upon the board. Because there's randomness to it. Like we had a moment where I won based off of two factors. I had a really lucky card pull, literally as the last action of the game. It got me 3 points, or got me 4 points, and I won the game by 1 point. Like, that's unfortunate. And then there were other things where like Jason was really close to getting one of his stats below, but had the wrong dice pool, so he didn't get those points. Elizabeth, same thing, like had a miss, like couldn't get the dice she wanted. So I like that randomness to it, while it's also, because I just feel like sometimes, especially the crew that I play board games with, it can be overwhelming if it's just raw strategy. I don't have a lot of heavy gamers in my life. So Role Player, really, really fun. If you're into the D&D universe at all, definitely worth checking out. And then Terraforming Mars is one that I have had on my, like, I need to play this list for a long, I mean, it's top 10.
Yeah, it's still top 10 of Board Game Geek all time.
Yeah, so...
And it was published like 6 or 7 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, so it's still hanging on. So.
Several expansions, has a great app, apparently,
fantastic
that
app.
plays. So Terraforming Mars is exactly what it sounds like. You have Mars in front of you, and you're drawing cards to sort of gain abilities and powers and stats and things like that. I'm not sure, like, thematically, I guess you're, like, trying to increase your crew and corporation and, like...
Yeah, you have corporations that have different abilities, I guess, thematically with all the...
Yeah, like I'm trying to figure out, like, thematically why I'm gathering these cards. Like, we're a business coming... I guess that's what it is.
That's
like,
you're
a corporation
coming
to... And there's 3 or however many players coming to... Mars to...
They're sending people to do things there. Like my corporation was really good at producing heat, which is a resource you can use. Yeah. And I could use my heat as money because that's what they're really good. And
and like I had a mining corporation, so I had a lot of like raw ore and titanium. So it was really cool. I got absolutely clobbered in that game because we got to the end and Elizabeth looked at me and was like, Robbie, you forgot to do a third of the game. Because there was these elements, and it's really cool. As I would say, it's like an engine builder. I wouldn't even say, I don't think does it classify as a Euro? Because there's not really worker placement.
Yeah, it's not really placement the same way. It's more like an engine building, a card. You're playing cards essentially.
Yeah.
Those cards do things. They put green spaces on tiles on the board. They build oceans. They put cities on the board. But in the end, you're creating resources to buy cards. So it's really like a hand management or card management, tableau building, engine building. You're kind of building a tableau list yourself, which helps you do your engine.
And then there's a shared board, because it is like Wingspan that we talk about all the time here is a tableau like engine builder where you're building your pieces, and Terraforming Mars takes that same concept, but there's a board that everyone shares together with different goals and things like that. So it was super fascinating. Terraforming Mars we played on Tuesday. This is Friday, and I've been thinking about that game like the whole time. What I most likely will end up doing is getting the app. Yeah. And if I really play the app a lot, that will move me towards buying the board game. Yeah. So, what have you been playing?
It's cool. I'll talk about those two games real quick. Yeah. Then we'll talk about it. I'm glad I got to show Robbie. Now, Terraforming Mars is probably the heaviest game we played, because Dinosaur Island's heavy, but it's not really hard. It's just a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But like maybe it's the same complexity, but there's just so many different things going on in Terraforming Mars. So I was glad to finally, when he had told me he hadn't played it, I knew that I definitely want to talk about it, because eventually there's a good chance that one day even though we're a podcast for beginners, there's a lot of good things in Terraforming Mars that I hope to make it a feature game maybe in the next couple of years. We've done a couple hundred episodes, whatever. So, but I love Terraforming Mars. The app is great. And Role Player, what's great about Role Player is the actions are easy. You get a die and you place a die, you buy a card.
Yep.
That's really it. Obviously, way more strategy than that. But at its heart, you just draft a die. You can draft a die. You don't have to pay for the die. You place it, and then the second phase of that, you buy a card. Now, where you place the die gives you some bonus actions and some scoring, and then the cards you buy may give you some additional action and scoring. But at its heart, Role Player is take a die, place it, buy a card, and then it moves pretty fast. There's not a lot of analysis paralysis in that.
Yeah.
I'm hijacking Robbie's talk about Role Player, but what I told Robbie about Role Player when we were doing it is that it would be in my top 5 list of games. When I talk about my favorite games of all time, I always forget Role Player, and then when I put it out, I'm like, this is really one of my favorite games, because it is quick, snappy turns if you know it.
Yeah.
Not a lot, because there's only 5 cards you can buy, and then if you're in a 4-player game, in a 3-player game, there's only 4 cards you could even buy out of the market phase, or 4 die, so you don't really have to overthink it. Yeah. And if you're the third person, it's like, well, I just got to take what's left. So the turns can be quite quick. I mean, the teach and the play was like an hour and a half for us, a little bit more than an hour and a half. Yeah. And so it went well. So I'm glad we got to play those. The couple other games we played this week.
The last thing I'll say about Role Player is what I did enjoy about the turn pacing is at the beginning, you kind of can think about it, but you are just there's so many powers that can adjust your board that you can kind of just you can go fast.
Right.
So the first several turns go really fast. The middle to late turns go really slow, because you're like, okay,
3
it's
turns
coming
less.
down to it. Yeah,
really
I'm trying to plan
turns.
it. And then I joked with Jason, because we got to the last turn and Elizabeth was looking at her board and she was like, oh, someone left their card out there. And I was like, oh no, I've already gone. I've literally finished my entire turn, because there was 2 slots and I'm looking for 2 specific things, and I just made the decision this is less valuable. So I've given up on it.
And and there's a bunch of expansions I was showing Robbie. I haven't played any of them because I went all in on it. So that's now I told him I'm gonna leave it out, and maybe after Fantastic February is when I may put on the table for a week to play the expansions. I love it so much. Yeah. But the games I'm going to talk about, we're going to pivot heavy from Role Player is a midweight game. Easy actions, but definitely closer to midweight. Terraforming Mars is heavyweight. Yeah. We're going to jump to some really light stuff that I love. One of the games I was happy to show Robbie is a game called Ohanomy. I hope I'm pronouncing that way. At least that's the way the Southern guy calls it. It's a 3-round game in which you're drafting and playing cards. I love drafting, one of my favorite actions. So drafting is where we've talked about before with Sushi Go, but basically we start the game, I have 7 cards in my hand, I choose 2 to play and I pass. Now I get 5 cards, I choose 2 to play and I pass. Now I have 3 cards too. So that's what drafting is. So those type of games in general are pretty quick. The cool thing about Ohanami, during the game, you're essentially going to create 3 columns. The cards in the deck number 1 to 120. And so in your 3 columns, you're building 3 columns that ascend or descend with your cards with those numbers. So essentially you can never, once you start a column, you're always playing a higher card on the top of the column or a lower card on the bottom. So say my first column had 24 and 33. Well, in that column, I can only play a 34 or higher on the top or a 23 or lower on the bottom. So it's an interesting strategy based on what cards get in your hand to how you want to place them in the column. Logically, you're like, oh, I want to play 117 and then 116 and 115. But you also have the in-game scoring based on the colors of the cards. There are 4 different colors in the cards: blue, green, gray, and pink. Blue scores all 3 rounds, but it's only 3 points per card. Green scores 2 rounds, and they're like 4 points per card. Gray scores 1 round, I think, and they're like 7 points per card. But then there's this outlier of pink cards that score based on a factor, basically. Like if you have 1, you have 1 point. If you have 3, maybe it's 5 points. But if you have maybe 15, it's like 60 or 70 points. And my lovely wife was sneakily just getting pink after pink after pink after pink after pink. And you score 3 times in the game. At the end of each round, you'll score after you've played all your cards. You're like, oh, wow, I'm doing really good, And at the end, you're like, wow, Elizabeth had an insane number of pink cards.
She gets 130 points.
So that's it. And this is a game that it's quick, snappy turns because you literally have to pick 2 cards and play them, and you're doing it, and you're going on, you're moving from there. What I love about Ohanami, and that's what I told Robbie, because I track all my games in an app called BG Stats. Super cool app to track everything. What I love about Ohanami, I have never won the game. And since I've tracked it in my app, 0 for 8, and I will happily play it right now. And if I lose again, I'll happily play it again because I love the drafting. I love playing the cards and seeing if I can do it. I had a great time. What did you think about Ohanami? So.
Yeah, it's funny. Like there are concepts that carry through different genres of games, and it's like, oh, what I liked is the idea that like blues score every round but have a little weight is unique to us. Like it's not unique. I'm sure there are set collection games that's there, but
right.
Like the color system was very obvious. I thought it was really cool, and that like I went heavy on greens and pinks. Like those were my 2 strategy. I wanted midweight, and then I wanted to slam them at the end because I looked over and Elizabeth was gathering all the
right.
pinks, and I was like, she's gonna get 150 points for having every pink card. Like that ain't gonna happen.
Right.
And instead she got like 13 of them. Yeah. So I didn't do as good a job stopping her. But yeah, so like that was pretty unique, and I think that is a set collection classic.
Yeah.
They just ramp up so fast.
Right. And it's you can play multiple games of it super quick. Yeah. It goes up to 5 players, I think, but at 3 players, at 2 players, it doesn't play quite as good because you're just passing the same cards back and forth. But it starts shining at 3, 4, and then at 5, you're seeing the cards less and less. It's super great. So I was glad we ever played Ohanami. And then one more game that's light but not, and is great, and it helps me break my board game snobbery. We actually just got out a deck of cards and played a game. It's amazing how many games you can play with just a regular standard deck of cards. I joked with Robbie, like some of these Uno games, if you slapped it a cool name on it, had a big board game publisher on it, I'd probably think it's great. But if you give me Uno Flip or something, it doesn't sound that great. Yeah. So this game, the main game, one name of it is Up and Down the River. Yep. And it's basically a card game in which it's about trick-taking game. And the heart of it is, we'll talk a little bit more trick-taking later on in this episode, but essentially, we played the 3-player game, so we all get 1 card, and that you have to tell, based on that, how many tricks you think you can win with traditional trick-taking. I play a card, if I win that trick, I take it. You're bidding on how many you can take. The cool thing is, the dealer, which rotates each time, has to bid something that won't match the total number of tricks. So if there's 2 cards out there, we each have 2 cards, and I bid 1, and Elizabeth bids 0. Well, that means Robbie can't, or he bids 1. If she bids 0, he can't bid 1 as well, even though he knows he can only pull 1 trick. He has to bid something else. So, not explaining that very well.
The dealer has to the dealer is the only one restricted to make sure that the number of tricks available is offset.
Right. Yeah. So you can't ever within the 3 of them always score the exact number of tricks because the score would just stay the same based on the scoring. Because if I say I'm going to win one trick and then win that trick, I get 10 points plus in the number of tricks I win that hand.
Yeah.
If I bid 0 and win none, I get 10 points, just no additional points. So the idea is that the dealer has to offset so that someone cannot win their bid. So every single turn, at least one player will not get their bid. So they will not get that 10 points plus anything else, right? And so as a trick-taking game, it's fascinating because if you're the first person, okay, if I have a 2 of diamonds, if no one has diamonds, I could win with this 2, or someone could take that 2 all the way. Plus, you turn over the top card of the deck, and that's the trump, which means the trump can beat any other card, right? Other than a higher trump card. It was fun. It was interesting take on trick taking for sure to go through that. It was fun to just have a deck of cards do it as well, just play a fun game with the deck of cards. And we had a good time going because for a 3-player game with Robbie, we went up to 7 and then went back down. So at one point we had 7 cards in our hand, and you're bidding, oh well, I don't really know, right? At 7 it's a little easier, but then what's funny is when we had 1 or 2 cards, I felt really good about what I was doing going up. When we came back down, I was like, with 2 cards, I was more lost because I see the flow of the game. I'm like, okay, what are the odds that... And at one time, I had a king of spades. I'm like, oh, I'm definitely getting this. And I played the king, and Elizabeth played the ace of spades. But we had like 3 cards each or 4 cards each. What are the odds that she literally had the ace of spades, and I was counting that trick the entire way? Yeah. And Robbie did the same thing once. I think he had a queen, and I took the king, and at 100%, you have to play the odds that queen was there. It was a fun game for sure. We have talked different times about trick-taking games. When Robbie told me about this one before, it sounded interesting, so I'm glad he had us play it. And it worked really well for this episode. I'm going to turn it back over to Robbie about that.
Trick-taking in general, if you play a rook or a spade or something like that, you're always bidding on tricks that you can take. And those games have punishments for betting incorrectly, but most of the time, unless you consistently bet incorrectly, the punishment really doesn't matter. Like in spades, you pick up a sandbag, but until you get 10 sandbags, you get a sandbag for every extra trick you take. Right. But if you pick up 10, you get knocked like, I can't remember, it's like 100 points.
It's 100 points, I think. I thought it was.
So you lose a ton of points for doing that. Whereas the game, if you like trick taking up and down the river, the whole goal is just betting correctly.
Right.
So even in that one, like where the first round where everybody gets 1 card, if you're the dealer and Jason's looking at it and he's like, I have a 2 that is not trump. And then Elizabeth's looking at it and she's like, I have a 4 that's not trump. And I have literally any trump, I'm going to win regardless. So if they're both looking at their hand, they're like, I can't take any tricks. 0, 0. I can't say 1 because everybody wins. So I also have to say 0, kind of a deal. So it does make it really fascinating. And then when you get higher up the river, you are playing much more of a traditional trick-taking game. And I love that Jason encapsulated that perfectly of like, then you get back into, okay, I can just play like I normally do. And then when you come back around, you're like, wait a minute, it's like a whole new game again.
Totally different game, right? This 2 cards in my hand feel very different than the first time I had 2 cards in my hand because it was interesting to see that mind shift for that for sure. So
yeah. And it also, since it's a traditional card game, you can really play it with as many people as you can fit in the deck because then you just set your river at the top where you cannot deal enough cards out to everyone in the hand. So like realistically, we could have gone up to like an 18 card river or something like that, and we were like, that is a real long game, so we're just going to go to 7. Yeah. But speaking of long games, today's episode, we are talking about The Crew, which is both a trick-taking game, which we've not talked about as a category, but it's also our first cooperative game. Now, cooperative games are something that, as a genre, traditionally you are not playing against each other. Right. You're trying to beat the game. We talked about it in episode 10 with our... we both had cooperative games in there as options. I'm trying to remember, did The Crew?
The Crew didn't.
It didn't make either of our lists.
It didn't make our list, right? Because I didn't use trick taking as a traditional, because I tried to go by mechanic.
Yeah.
Or cooperative. Right. And cooperative.
You went Forbidden?
I think I went Forbidden Death, even though, or Forbidden Island, I think I went Forbidden Island because that's the easier version. Either way. I went one of those forbidden ones. But you went Marvel United still, right?
Yeah, I went Marvel United, or I went Mysterium.
Oh, that's right.
So The Crew came out in 2019, designed by Thomas Singh, and it's published by Cosmos, who does a lot of smaller box games. One beautiful thing about this is because it's a smaller box, it travels extremely well. I got introduced to The Crew by Jason last trip we were up here, and that's where we realized, like, I grew up with a trick-taking background. Y'all have a trick-taking background. And if you have any connection to trick-taking and you still have access to trick-takers in your life to play with, The Crew is such an incredible time. We literally adjusted the game we were going to play tonight so that when we finish filming this episode,
this is true,
we can play more of The Crew. And until we finish it, I feel like this is just going to be a staple. And even when we do finish it, we'll talk about what we're going to do after that. So in 2021, or
2020.
2020. It won the Kennerspiel. So you've heard us talk about the Spiel de Jars.
Jars. Spiel de Jars.
Sorry to all of our foreign speakers who we just butchered that.
We're from the South. So.
Yeah, roll tide. So the Kennerspiel is the more strategically heavy award. So, like Catan was a Spiel.
The Kenner wasn't around at that time. So the Kenner's been around for 10 years. But when we were looking this up to make sure, like, for example, we're hitting some big ones. Kennerspiel was Quaxquellenberg one, Wingspan one, and then the very next year, The Crew one. So there are ones that have that heavier kind of game in there, or more strategy. The Spiel... And I was doing research because I was trying to make sure I understood the difference between the Kenner and the Spiel. The Spiel in general, Spiel des Jahres, but we shorten the Spiel, it's more, most of the time, more family weight game, lighter type games. We talked about Calico, we talked about Kingdom Builder game, we talked about before King Domino.
Yep.
Whereas the Kenner, as Robbie was talking about, is a little bit more strategic games. Not necessarily super heavy games, but more strategic. And when we were looking through that list, it kind of made sense. So I think they created that category for that reason. But yeah, in 2020, this little bitty card game won the Kennerspiel, which helped kind of launch it for sure.
So in The Crew, you are a crew of astronauts flying around space, completing a series of missions. These missions are trick-taking based. So in trick-taking traditionally, we'll talk about Spades as sort of the standard for this, because Rook is like a trick-taking game that uses a special deck. In Spades, you have the 4 suits of a main deck: hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. So of those, Spades is always the trump. The beautiful part about this, there is no trump. There is trump in the game, but it's like it's a card. So instead of 4 suits, you have 4 colors. And those 4 colors have cards ranging 1 through 9. The game follows traditional trick-taking principles, which are someone's going to play a card that has a color and a number assigned to it. Everyone has to then follow suit, and if you have that color in your hand, you have to play that color. If you don't have that color in your hand, you can play an opposite color, and anything that isn't trump basically just doesn't matter.
Right.
It's thrown away. And then the trump cards, there are 4 trump cards, and they are rocket ships: 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 being the most powerful card in the game. It trumps everything. 1 trumps everything except the other trump. So in The Crew, you and your crew are going to play a series of missions that have different goals. These goals can be, there's a deck that is the main cards, and then they have a smaller version of the main deck that has many copies of all of the cards. So there are 50 missions in the game that get increasingly more difficult. So for the first mission, you're going to draw a card from the mini deck, and it's going to be we'll say blue 4. So whoever is the mission leader is going to have you're going to deal out the whole deck, and they're going to look at their hand, and whoever has the 4 rocket ship is the mission leader. And then once that happens, they take the 4 blue that you drew from the mini deck. And the objective of that mission is the mission leader has to win the trick that has the blue 4 in it. It's that simple.
Right. Yep. Yeah, for sure. It's very, it throws, it's still the traditional trick taking like Robbie laid out, but then it throws it on its head because now it's forcing you into specific tasks to do. Essentially, it's a task-based game.
Yeah.
And that each round, the game itself is actually The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. which comes into the space theme. And in that book, it gives you 50 scenarios that go from each of those, and they have multiple tasks. And so, like, you're still doing traditional trick taking the entire time, but each task you have, each round you have, each goal you have, it changes up what you're trying to go for. So it could be as easy as take the 4 blue. Now, what if the key is, to talk deep, what if by pure chance the only blues Robbie has is the blue 4 and the 2-4, and the blue 2? Sorry. I'm like, well, now, how am I gonna win as Robbie with only a blue 4? The cool thing is it gives you the ability to do communication. That's right. In the game, it gives you a little bit of help because it's the game, it can be that hard. So you have this little bitty token that lets you tell. So, and also what we didn't say was that you're not supposed to talk about what cards in your hand. Traditional trick taking, you don't say, oh, by the way, I got a 10, 9, and 8 of diamonds. What do you got? You can't talk about what's in your hand. Traditional trick taking, the crew's the same way, and you're not supposed to really talk at all. In the truest sense, you're in space, and your comms are maybe messed up, so you can't really talk to each other, so you're not talking about what's in your hand. Anybody who's played card games know you're going to learn your little tricks of the trade, right? But you have a single token in which you can communicate a single thing per the entire hand of that, your entire hand. What you can do is you take a card from your hand, and you can put that token at the top of the card. So say Robbie has the blue 4 and a blue 2. He would put the blue 4 out in front. So he's telling everybody, hey, I got the blue 2. And he puts this token at the top of that card to say, my highest blue is this 4. Sorry. My highest blue is this 4. Now, if he only had the blue 4, he could put that token in the middle to basically tell everybody, this is my only blue, and it happens to be this 4. If you put it at the bottom, it's your way of saying that's the lowest blue. You're really communicating colors on principle, but then you're going to see the number from that, because your communication is technically for the colors, but then we're going to see what that is. You can only do that once per turn, and so you can do it permission, which is that task you have, and then you can do it anytime during that. But then once you've communicated that, that's it. You can't communicate anymore. You don't have to communicate at the beginning either. You can communicate later in the turn. You just can't communicate in the middle of hands being played or cards being played. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Like when we first started playing the crew, and Elizabeth and I did, we were always communicating at the very beginning. Well, that doesn't always make sense, because sometimes you need to get rid of cards in your hand. And now the last card I have, the last blue I have is that blue 4. So I love the fact that it gives you that kind of challenge. And some of those missions may actually tell you can't communicate at all.
Yeah, you can't communicate at all, or you can't communicate until the third trick has been taken. Because in most of them, at least where we're at in the game right now, we're on mission 30, 29.
Something like that,
And so on most of them, you will finish the assigned task. You'll either fail the mission or you'll finish the assigned task before you actually deal with all of the cards.
Yeah.
And so the hands play out. But like one of the missions we came across was one person is not allowed to take a single trick. So they have to, in trick taking terms, they have to go nil. And so that was like, if you're a trick taker at all, it's a rush. You have played a game where you've been like, all right, I'm just getting rid of all of it. We talked about Up and Down the River. Such a great transition, because in Up and Down the River, you can, if one person bet there's 4 tricks available and the first person up is like 4.
Right.
Okay, they got a really good hand.
Yep.
I'm going 0. And I'll let the dealer offset it. I'm just going to throw cards away. So if you've played a lot of trick taking, you're very good at fluffing off cards. And so the missions change. And then there's some missions where it's like you draw 5 cards from the mini deck and you have to win, like whoever gets them. Because you also, for the more cards that get added, it's not like I can look at them as the mission leader and say, all right, I'm going to take this one, and this one. The way it has to work is I'm going to take this one, then the next player on our crew picks a card that they're going to take, and then the next player takes a card they're going to take, and then it's back to the mission leader, and it rotates. So you kind of have to adjust accordingly, but you aren't allowed to communicate during that part of it, and so you're just kind of trying to work for you, and then so it's like you have to take the tricks can't be won outside of that order, or else you fail.
Right. Yeah, it's the fun thing. One of the many fun things about that is that each mission is so different. Some are so similar, but some are so different, and things that you wouldn't have really thought about. I love the creativity the designer of the game has done is just really interesting. Like, I never would have thought about that, but I love that challenge. Some of the hardest ones, like I'll show some of these tokens for our YouTube ones. So sometimes the tokens are like, you got to do, this has to be the first trick taken, this has to be the second trick taken. But sometimes you have to take a trick before another trick. A card, like the trick with the 4 green has to be taken before the trick with the 5 green. And like Robbie said, you start with the commander and you choose which one you want. Sometimes the commander chooses what that order is. Sometimes the people can choose what it is. And there are ones, we had one last night or 2 nights ago, where the commander looked at the gold cards face down. So here's the mini cards. You can see they're slightly smaller, so we can basically the same cards, but they're slightly smaller. You look at the gold cards face down, and then the commander can keep one, but then they randomly choose it to the other person, and there's been no communication at all. Yeah. So you're like, I hope you can get this 6 yellow, and it took us forever to do that. I remember when I was finally the commander, the 3 cards that had to be one by each of us, I had all 3 cards in my hand. So but I can only communicate a single thing to anybody. And so it's so interesting to force you to use that trick-taking mind, those of us who've done years of trick-taking, and then kind of bend it a little bit to how can I manipulate this very unique situation, right? In trick-taking games, a lot of these things have come up that way, but now we're being told to do it this way, and how can we manipulate our turns without talking? And then you have to fall back on what makes this game even more exciting, again, if you're a trick-taking game. If you have no experience with trick-taking, PSA here, this game may not be great unless you have someone who could teach you trick-taking. Because trick-taking, if you've never done it, is hard to conceptualize. Robbie already said this, if you're a trick-taker or you have that background, this game is to me, it's a must-buy. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But it's fun because you fall back on your standard tropes, right? Like, I'm going to throw these low blues because I need them to get rid of their high blues, right? One of the things, I need to win a trick with an 8 blue, but I have a bunch of blues, so I start throwing my other blues out because I need to pull the 9 blue, so now I can play the 8 blue. But you still got to pay attention to those things. Yeah. In one last night or the night before, I threw something out that Robbie was supposed to win. Yeah. And it was easy. It set, and he threw something out, and I was like, huh. Did I miss that? Because I guess Elizabeth has it, and then
2 turns later,
and he's like, "Oh, I'm an idiot."
Yeah, like, 2 turns. Okay. I looked at it and I was like, "Okay, I got to take this event." Come on, dude. It was right there. He set me up. One thing that is really cool about trick-taking is that traditionally trick-taking games are in partners. Yeah. Like euchre, hearts, spades.
4-player game, you're playing teams, basically.
Yeah, so you're doing that. And if you play a lot of trick-taking games, you and your partner have a connection. Yep. We came from a family of 4 growing up, and so it was always my brother and my mom versus my father and I in spades. And so Dad and I just have this second level of communication when we play spades, because you just know how the other person likes to play and all that. But I firmly believe, after playing the crew with Jason and Elizabeth as much as we have, I feel confident that I could play spades against spades or rooks against most people with either of you as my partner. Yeah. Because at this point, we have played so many games of trick-taking to be like, all right, yeah, we're good. Because that's the fun part about it as well, is it's puzzle solving along with trick-taking.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is a satisfaction when you play Stone Age, and we're going to do an episode on this soon, so I don't want to spoil the game too much. But Stone Age, for instance, when you executed the strategy last night, there's a satisfaction, right, of I have succeeded at implementing my will over this game. And when you get stuck on a mission in the crew, on that mission you were talking about where we had to sign the cards, it kept coming down to okay, the leader would pick it, have the other 2 options, and be like, okay. Yeah, okay, I'm guessing I'll give this one to Robbie, this one to Jason.
Pure guess.
Awesome.
Pure guess.
And then we're both looking at it and come on. If you would have just switched them, we win this mission so easy.
So many times last night, it was they just had been swapped. We would have actually won this. But
but when we finally got it, the whole table was yes, we're going to do it. And so there is that. You get that dopamine hit over and over again as you're playing. And it's like I'm looking forward to trying to tackle more puzzles tonight. And I knew coming up here for this trip, like I was thinking, man, I really hope we get to play the crew.
Right. You were saying that before you come, and when I love when Robbie comes for lots of reasons, play disc golf, good friend, hang out, but we get to play a lot of board games.
Yeah.
And we like Robbie's being generous when he says it's 6. Like I try to push as many as Robbie can handle while we're here. But this one, after we played the crew the other night, like I'm the same way. I'm like, I would rather just play the crew. Like last night we had a Fantastic February game we had to play. But if we didn't have Fantastic February, I think Elizabeth and I would have agreed, we would have played the crew for like 4 hours because we're having so much fun because it's bringing back the challenge of the game and the puzzle. Because you're right, when you say it's a puzzle, it is. The crew definitely makes it a puzzle because we had two different ones I'll talk about recently that get heavier. We had one where two people had to pull tricks, and it didn't matter who, but they had to win with the one. Like they had to lead with the one and win that trick. Trick takers, that's extremely hard. Doable, but when you can't tell each other what you're doing or what one you have.
Because the one is the weakest card available.
And after we played through once and we immediately like, no, this is our strategy, and then we nailed it the second time. And that was like a stand-up moment, like, holy crap, the second time we did an extremely hard thing. And then on principle, the 3 face-down cards, the odds are surely we would have gotten it, and that took time and time and time and time. And then we got to ones where we each, because it's a 3-player game, we each had to take 2 tricks, but then we each had 3 other ones that had to be in order. Like we had to do in order. And I was like, that's where the puzzle is like, well, you got to win with the 8 yellow, but I have to win with the 4 yellow, but I have the 8 yellow, and Elizabeth has the 4 yellow. So you're literally puzzling it while having to think about how do I actually do this via the mechanisms of trick taking. It is fantastic. I totally agree. Like it's we're going to be done here in a short bit, and I'm ready to play as late as Robbie can stay up because he's got to drive back to Alabama tomorrow. But we'll play as much as we can. And I am glad because I've owned the crew for years, and it's just your last trip. I was like, your 4th trip up here is the first time we busted out, and it was like I said, immediate hit. It hit all the good feels for sure.
Because there are a ton of people, and like you can tell if you go back and listen to the episodes, you can tell like when we first played the crew, because suddenly our episodes trick taking started like coming up in conversations more on the episode. It probably was around like episode 7 or 8, and it was because we realized like it just reignited this passion that goes back to before either of us were hobby gamers. And you just had a deck of cards, and so you had Rook, and you were playing that over and over again. So it's such a cool moment. My wife did not grow up as a trick-taking family. And because of that, like, she is, like, I love it so much. Like, we go to trivia, and I'm like, oh, we can play the crew before we start trivia that night. Yeah. And I'm super excited about it. But, like, we have 5 people there, which is max out for this game. And 3 of them are not trick-takers. So we're only on like mission 12. Like it's not even like we're progressing that far. But my wife loves Up and Down the River. So it's a great like progression of teaching trick taking. And I'm slowly, it sounds like manipulative, but I'm slowly making her into a trick taker because in my mind, it's that childhood raising of like when we have our kids, I would love for our kids, like if we end up with 2 kids, to be able to have like, we're just going to play some trick taking games and all that. So I love that a lot. Jason, tell them about the price because it's very different.
Here's what's great. Like the best thing about this, not the best thing, one of the many, many, many great things about this is the MSRP, the standard price for it is $14.99. $14.99, the lowest priced MSRP game we've mentioned yet. And you can often find it on sale. I mean, even the one I get, because I gave Robbie a copy of mine, I'd had for a while because I got it for like $6 on a crazy good sale at Amazon. And I'd just been waiting to give it to somebody. It had been literally sitting on my shelf for like a year. But $15, without doubt. And we say this a lot because we try to be honest. Like, if the game's a little heavier cost, we'll say it. Yeah. This one, if you're a trick taker, I have to do that caveat over and over. Our fans who watch, our watchers who watch, who have no trick taking background, it may not be the best game for you unless you have good friends who can teach you the mechanism of trick taking because it won't be as much fun. Yeah. It may not. I won't say won't. It may not be as much fun, but for $15, as a trick-taking game, just sitting here, I'm thinking about my friend who I talked about in the first episode who really got me into gaming, Joey. We played a ton of spades in college, a ton of spades. And we're going to Disney this fall. The crew 100% is going with us to play. And there's a chance that may be the only thing we play every night. Because he even said, hey, make sure you bring some games.
Yeah.
But like, there's no doubt I'll be taking the crew because it's because of that background and because of that price. You can't beat $14.99 for a full price for a game.
Yeah. And I will go ahead and say, if you're not a trick taker, like, we are hyping this game up. And
yes.
I will jump into the cookie rating here in a second. But like, and I have an idea of where this is going to land, personally. But to me, we're hyped about this game, and you can tell our excitement. Like, when we love a game, it almost like it takes me to quacks in terms of like our excitement for it. Yeah. Because we're trying to think about, okay, we're going to do an episode before I leave. What do we want to do? And we just had forgotten about it.
Yep.
Even though we were excited to play the crew, and we were like, yeah, we can't really wait a minute. Why can't we do an episode on the crew? Because it's amazing. Right. And we love this game. If you're not a trick taker, I would suggest sticking with a Rook or a Spades or an up and down the river type vibe until you learn trick taking. Yeah. Get the game if you see it on sale, but that is the weakness, is if you're not a trick taker, this is not a great game, I would say, to teach you trick taking. That's
a very good caveat, because I mean it is for seasoned trick takers, this is a fantastic game, but it's extremely challenging. And some missions can take you 10, 12, 13 times to go through it. That's like one full game of something else, right? But because the moment you fail the mission, you just stop, reshuffle, and deal it out. Yeah. The moment you fail, you stop and reshuffle. And as long as you like that challenge, like my cards are so worn out. I don't sleeve cards, but I said last night, like I should sleeve them. I'll just buy, if I ever see it on sale, I'll just buy a new copy so that I can have them. Because they're so, because you handle them so much. Yeah. But Robbie's captured it for sure. Like, it is a challenging game. And there's a reason why it won the Kenner Spiel, the more challenging prize, is because it's so thinky. The puzzle gets so hard. Like, I remember, and the reason why, it wasn't in my top 10 we talked last, because even we played last time I had a good time, but Robbie's the first time I played with a true trick, who has an experienced background with it. We had shown it to some family friends who didn't really have a trick-taking background, and so we were trying to teach trick-taking in this. And as Robbie said, this is not a game to learn how to play trick-taking games. You need to learn that with a traditional one. And after you know it quite well, or are comfortable with the mechanisms of trick-taking or some of the strategy, this is it. I'm going to jump right in my rating. I'm super excited. Yeah. I almost brought the cookie downstairs. I should have popped it out. That would have been great. Maybe another time, because we have some double doozies upstairs. Without doubt, this is a double doozy. But I have to be fully transparent and honest. Like, a year ago, no way, this is it. When Robbie was here last time, I had a good time, but I didn't really keep thinking about it. But just once we get the higher levels, and once we have those challenges, like, wow, this is fantastic. And if I don't play it for a year, it may fall back off. But I don't think it's going to happen, because, as Robbie's talked about, we probably will have a couple of quick game, the crew nights or any other trick-taking game nights for the years to come. So, double doozy, very easy for me. Love it, having a blast.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try to hide it. It's our second double doozy, because I completely agree. And the caveat for me is it's the crew that you play with. This is true. If you're playing with the wrong people, and I love my friends. They are my best friends through and through. When I play with them, it's a chocolate chip for me, probably a peanut butter to sugar for them, because it's just not their genre. Yeah. But you get the right people going. Like, we are going to do an event in a month where Jason's coming down to Birmingham, and the crew I'm going to bring to game night, because I could see a world where we advertise, because there are Birdie fan members that are going to listen to this and be like, okay, we can find some trick takers. We could easily bust the crew out there, and everyone's doing their party games and all that, and then there's a crew over there just having a riot with trying to push through. So it is such a fantastic game. The price you can't beat, the quality, the replayability, because I'm sure there are missions that we have beaten that we've moved past, and if we just finish this and try to run back through, I bet different missions probably hold us up.
Yep. It's because so often the way with any game with dealing cards, is the way the cards get dealt. I remember, the last time you were here, there were a few missions we just flew through. I'm like, wow, this is pretty easy. But then when you hit one that seems easy, you're like, the cards don't come your way, or the communication isn't there, or the lack of communication, or the mental communication isn't there. It's fantastic. There is, for any folks who watch us who are already board gamers, we know there's a sequel. That's basically thematically it's in the sea, and it's still the same concept of trick taking, but it changes up the way that it gives you the challenges. In a lot of hardcore, if you watch board game reviewers, they'll probably tell you they'll like that one more because it's more the newer hotness. But without doubt, I haven't played that yet, but I've already opened it and looked through it, and I'm like, no, this is the good one to start with how the crew works, and then move on to the other one for sure. And the same, like Robbie said, once we finish this, I already have the other one. It's upstairs. I've already opened it. So once we get through all 50 missions on however many trips it takes with us being together, we will definitely move on to that next one and start hitting it as well. So it is fantastic. So this is one like Brad and Kimberly, who were brought up on Euchre, they're trick takers. So at some point I'll introduce them to the crew, and then maybe we'll get the same vibes for sure. So it's a double Doozie, double Doozie. Hands down, love it.
Because I'm thinking to myself, I have my year in review for my full-time job, which is content creation in the disc golf world, and I set a goal of out loud, like, I want to reach this many subscribers by the end of the year, and I set it with my 2 direct reports, like, okay, here we go, and they were both like, they gave me this look of like, that's a big goal, but it's doable. Like, I think we can get there. I'm going to go ahead and say my goal for the end of the year is we're going to finish this. We, by the end of 2024, we are for sure going to have moved through the crew. So I'm very excited about it. Great game. And I will tell you, we had another game ready as an idea to talk about, which will be our next episode.
That will be what's going to do that next one.
And the crew jumped it. And I'm so glad that I'm glad that we remembered to go for it, which sounds so funny because we just, it's a double Doozie and we almost missed it. But when you think, it just sits with you, and I would say that first puzzle that stumps you that's going to be the make or break moment for you with the crew.
Whether you like having that challenge, whether you like doing the puzzle, and hopefully you do. It in general gets rave reviews from board game content creators who have the trick taking background. There's a reason why it's a mega hit. The cost, it went in the Kinderspiel, and just having that background in trick taking makes it a blast. So
awesome. Well, hey, that is our second double Doozie. Feels good that we got there.
For sure.
I was excited for it. I honestly couldn't have told you what game it was going to be. Great game. Thank you guys so much for listening. I would normally in this moment talk about reviews, but I normally pull that up on my phone. And because we're here, we're recording with it. So we'll talk about reviews, but we are pushing, once again, still pushing for those reviews. We're grateful for all of you giving those reviews. When we reach 50 reviews on Spotify, and that will unlock a giveaway, and 50 reviews on Apple Podcasts, that will also unlock a giveaway. We'll be giving away 2 copies of Quacks of Codenberg. So make sure, if you like what you're listening to, we really appreciate it. It does. Seriously, it takes you no time at all to drop that review, and it would mean the world to us because it just helps us get to more people's ears and in front of more audiences. And also, if you hadn't hit that subscribe button on YouTube, we would really appreciate it as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Jason, you ready to play some crew?
Let's play some crew.
And Mom, we'll see you later.